Happy Saturday. It's me, Alex, stay-at-home reader. I am in my car right now. Oliver is, you guessed it, at baseball practice. So I figured while I'm sitting here, I will do my February wrap-up. I don't feel like I read a lot, but then, I've got a few things here written down. I think because it was a lot of audiobooks, I feel like I didn't read a lot. I feel like I was on the same two physical books forever. And it wasn't until switching to audio that I even finished those, but I did a lot of the combined mixed media reading this month. Let's jump in. First book of the month was Parable of the Sower. I have it written down as Earthseed. That's what the stutter was. Parable of the Sower. I read it for my so-called book club, and I did a reading vlog of that. That was a 5-star read. Dystopian, kind of apocalyptic, I would say near future, but at this point it's just an alternate reality. Very dark, very gruesome, but a lot to think about. And so as soon as I finished that one, I jumped right into the second book, which is Parable of the Talents. It's a duology, so that's it and that's all. I also vlogged reading that, and that's pretty much the only videos I made in February were those 2 reading vlogs. That one I didn't like as much, but it was still a 4-star book. That one had a lot of religious elements that made me uncomfortable. But it also had a lot of political stuff that was very relevant to the United States today. So this was written at the end of the 90s. So yeah, the Earthseed duology. At the same time as I was reading that duology, I had started The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver, and that was a 5-star read. Moved on to the second book in that, so I guess it's the Greer family series. Again, just 2 books. The second book was Pigs in Heaven, which I gave 4 stars. So The Bean Trees follows a young girl who leaves her home in rural Kentucky, just bored. The place is just not for her. The only thing to do there is get married, get pregnant, and she wants nothing to do with that. So she leaves. Immediately is given a child. So as leaving Kentucky, she ends up breaking down in Oklahoma. She's got a really shitty car, and someone just gives her a baby. When she's on Cherokee land, a Cherokee woman just kind of gets in her car and says, "Here, take this. It's not safe with me." And it's a little girl, and she ends up in Arizona making friends, getting a job, and getting attached and deciding to adopt this child, and also just start seeing what a crappy place the world is, and her worldview is expanded beyond anything she had experience with in Kentucky. She gets involved with some Guatemalan refugees and helping them. It's really interesting to see her grow in social awareness and consciousness. And then in the second book, we follow much broader scope. There's a lot more points of view, a lot more characters, and basically there's a Cherokee lawyer who becomes aware of the adoption and it violates tribal laws. That is it the Indian Child Welfare Act? I don't remember. But basically, any adoption needs to be given approval from the tribe, and in this case, it was not. So she contacts Taylor and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Like, I don't blame you, and I understand you've done your best for this child, but the tribe has to approve the adoption, and the most important thing to the tribe is children growing up in that environment and, you know, just passing along the culture, right? They don't want to lose their members and letting white people take children out of the tribe. That was the whole point of this act. So Taylor books it out of there. She runs away with her daughter. And then you're also getting her mother, Taylor's mother's kind of story. She's run away from her own home and marriage. She's dissatisfied back in Kentucky, so she leaves. She meets up with Taylor to help her out, figure out what to do about her situation. The first book alludes to them having Cherokee blood, and so that gets explored more. It wasn't as good as the first book. It's very obvious very early how it's gonna go, and especially as like more characters start tying together. Barbara Kingsolver, as far as I could tell, is not Native American to any degree. I think she explores a lot of cultures and social issues in all her books. And I guess it's not for me to say how offensive or inoffensive she was. I could definitely pick up on stereotypes. But I definitely recommend the first book, and then the second book is like, why not pick it up? It was pretty good. So those books were also written in the 90s, and there is some language that's kind of like, but it's not done in a mean way. It's one of those are like, I can excuse it for being written in the 90s, where there are times when you're like, it doesn't matter when it was written, this is wrong. I don't know. In my opinion, which is worth nothing. This is of its time and not incredibly harmful or hurtful, but that's coming from me. Someone else might think differently. Let's move on. I listened to and read along. I had the book from the library. The Three Mothers. I forget what the subtitle is, but here it is. This follows the family history of the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. And so we get not just their mothers' lives, but like their mother's family, the areas they're from, what was happening politically as they were growing up, how being from different places influenced them, being involved in different parties, either the church or Garveyism or the Harlem Renaissance, how that shaped them, and then how in turn that shaped their sons, who they're obviously more familiar with. That book was beautiful. Highly recommend The Three Mothers. I listened to Something Fabulous for a nice light change of pace. This is a historical male romance, like at the center. But there is so much going on, like literally every color of the rainbow was represented in this book, and it was a lot of fun. Nice grumpy sunshine romance. Something Fabulous was the group read for the Queer for Lit book club, and I give that 3.5 stars just because it was a bit much. It was just silly. I think I go into romances expecting a 3-star book, and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't expect greatness out of romances. Maybe it's not fair, but like, I do use a different kind of enjoyment scale for romance as I do for other genres. And then I read and listened to Clean Air by Sarah Blake. Yes, Sarah Blake. This is another near future sci-fi end of the world kind of thing. But what was interesting is that instead of a climate apocalypse because of pollution, although I guess you can say it was like a pollution, global warming kind of response, what does us in is the trees blooming like out of control. Like all of a sudden the pollen count rises, just pollen in general, but especially from trees, and it becomes harmful where like humans can't breathe the air anymore. So humans now live in like these domes that are like airtight, filtered air. And what happens is that a serial killer is at night slashing people's domes and exposing them to the pollen in the air and dying. And so the main character, Isabel, she becomes obsessed with this. Her daughter even starts talking in her sleep, and she's having both sides of conversation in her sleep, and she's describing, like, she's saying it, but it's like someone telling her, and then she's also responding. So she's having both sides of the conversation, watching this killer cut through people's houses, and the parents are realizing that she's seeing what's happening. So the mother gets obsessed and tries to intervene, and she gets caught up in the investigation. I think she's a suspect at some point. And then it all kind of comes down to like the Isabel, the main character, being very dissatisfied with life as a wife and mother, with really nothing to do in this like kind of utopia, and she can't believe that people are just going about their lives as if we didn't used to have complete freedom and a full world, and now everything is contained to these like bubbles and simulated experiences, and how are we just allowing ourselves to be distracted, right? So she's kind of having like a midlife existential crisis, and she needs something to do, and so she gets obsessed with this case. And again, not a perfect book, 3.5 stars. Interesting, an interesting take on like what human life is like at the end of the world. I always imagine more like a subterranean existence, so it was interesting to see like what kind of setup, you know, staying on the Earth's surface, not leaving for space, not going underground, but staying on the surface, what life would have to look like in that case. So it was all very interesting, but then there was almost like this fantasy element to the book that was to a much higher degree than I expected. So there's almost too much going on, and that's what brought it down below a 4-star for me. Those were my main reads. I had a very quick DNF of a nonfiction book called The Bona Fide Legend of Cool Papa Bell, who was a player in the Negro Leagues. Very interesting person, but I guess the setup of the book is that there's not actually a lot of documentation on him specifically. So to fill in the gaps, it's just going to be a history of the Negro Leagues as a whole, kind of following the teams that he played on. And it was just hard to keep focus on, so I gave up. It was due back at the library. I read the 2 single issues that have come out since Saga returned from its hiatus. So that's issues 55 and 56. I don't really have a rating for those ones. It was good to be back in this world, but if you remember how it ended before going on hiatus, I'm pretty bummed out. I wasn't blown away. This is the first time I've read it in like single issue form. I came to it late. I think by the time I started reading the series, volume 8 had just come up, and so each volume is a bind up of several single issues, right? And then I think there's 9 or 10 volumes before they kind of went on their break, and so it's been 4 years since they put anything else out. And now here we are. I mean, I didn't hate it. I can definitely continue. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to read on anymore, honestly, the way it had ended and left off. If you know, you know. But I was able to jump right in. With the kids, I read The Book of Blood. I even reviewed this on my Instagram. This was a homeschool kind of supplement read, but it's very interesting. It's a nonfiction on blood, our circulatory system, how even before knowing what blood was, how our bodies worked, how ancient civilizations recognized it as something important. So it goes back into ancient civilizations using it in ceremonies, rituals, the beliefs around life, death, blood itself, and then it goes into medieval medicine, mistakes, assumptions, later more scientific discovery helping to hone medicine and an understanding of blood. It was actually really interesting. The kids, I think, enjoyed me reading it to them. I think they followed it. I think it was written in a pretty engaging way. Recommend if you're looking for a nonfiction, science, a homeschool supplement, or if you're just interested. I don't know. We also read a biography. It's a children's book, like elementary, middle grade book, biography on Harriet Tubman, written by Petrie, and I think this book came out in the 50s. The book was okay. It was a very narrative nonfiction. And so I think it did well in that way with Harriet Tubman's early life and connecting you to her as a person and her family. And then at the end of each chapter was like history outside of her, but like these would be important players later in her adult life as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And the kids enjoyed the biography. They enjoyed learning about her. I mean, what an impressive life. And then we finished, finally, our audiobook, The Mysterious Benedict Society. That took us forever. We started it in December. But, yeah, whenever we had a long car trip, we would listen to it. It was just very slow. Kids are really good. Their memories are excellent, where we can take like breaks from a book and they can jump right back in. So we finally finished that. They do want to continue that series. I'm surprised. I thought Owen especially was bored, but like we just went to New Hampshire and had to pick a book for the car ride. Actually, we went to Mystic, Connecticut, and then the next day we went to New Hampshire. So we had lots of time in the car. And so we had to pick an audiobook. And Owen wanted to do the next book in the Benedict Society, which surprised me. I thought he would be the one who was like, no, I'm done. Thanks. But we didn't. We started the new Vanderbeeker book. But I'll talk about that at the end of the month. That was it for February. This was boring, wasn't it? Sorry. I will, I guess, be back soon to let you know what I've started for March and what my reading plans for March are going forward. All right. See you later. Bye.